Welcome to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Ramosi Thurlow scale,
or MOTS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello, and welcome back to The Lost Signals Discusses Film and Television. Tonight we have a film you can watch on Amazon Prime. I don't think it was originally Amazon, as we just looked up, but you can check it out there.
It is now. Amazon bought it.
The 2019 film The Vast of Night. We had been hearing some good stuff and thought it might be a good time to talk about it. So I'm going to be your host tonight, Steve Ramosi, joined by Christopher Morgan.
No.
Jonathan Ian Manzer.
hello everyone.
And Scott Thurlow.
French's cat has been abducted by aliens.
You
Sci-Fi story.
motherfucker.
Fuck you.
Sorry.
So Ian, was that your log line?
That was my log
That
line.
was it really what I just said?
That was for real.
That was my log line.
I did not know that. Like you said you had one. I was like, okay, cool. Sorry, my bad.
All right. Well, this is why we should discuss
Actually,
what log line is beforehand.
Yeah.
This is Wolfman Jack here. Aliens are coming to town, baby.
That's what I seriously thought you were gonna go with. That's why I said what I said.
It's as soon as you said that, Scott, I'm like, oh my God, that is the most obvious thing. And as soon as Ian said fuck you too, I'm like, somebody beat me to the fact, like, oh, is that your log line? I'm like, yeah.
I think we saved the log line.
Wolfman Jack is also great.
So E, why don't you tell us about the plot?
The 1950s, small town America. Paranoia is creeping in as perhaps aliens. Maybe not, but yes, it's aliens. A switchboard operator and a local DJ discover weird signals and then start interviewing people until they discover, yes, it was aliens all along.
Turns out aliens.
Not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.
Spoiler. But like, I feel like no one should go into this movie thinking that it's not aliens, right? Like, it gives a distinct alien vibe pretty early, I feel like.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't play the slow burn all too well about the reveal. Here's the thing: Chris and I had a conversation before this that I appreciate this film more than I liked it, and you're right when you said you want to love this film. There's a lot going for it. There's a lot of daring things this film does, which it's often just conversations, either over the radio or over the phone lines, or being recorded. And yet, it's really up to a matter of taste whether you'll like this movie or not. Because I think I could see people absolutely hating this style of this thing. Overall, though, I enjoyed it. I did, though, and this is my big critique, is I really dislike the opening of this film.
Because you hate Aaron Sorkin, of course.
Yes, and it was very Sorkin. And it was hard to follow the dialogue. It was very rapid paced. I can see people stylistically loving it. I would have, if I wasn't recording this, have turned that film off about 10 minutes in, because I thought the entire film was going to be like that. I really was not looking forward to watching an entire caffeinated Aaron Sorkin piece. Then it slowed down, and when it slowed down, I was really bought into the world they were building. I think that the middle section of this film is when it's at its strongest, when they're interviewing the guy on the phone line, how they handle the switchboards. Someone was very knowledgeable about technology at this era, and it really showed through, and I thought it was beautifully done. So I'm going to have to give it a 2, because it was an introduction that almost turned me off from the film.
I want to go next, because I agree 100% with Ian. I was like, to be honest with you, I like the introduction. I didn't get a Sorkin thing. I reminded me a lot of the Hudsucker Proxy, in that it's very fast paced. Like Jennifer Jason Leigh is like, blah, 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 blah. But the thing is that you get that in snippets, and you get the introduction to that is much shorter. We've seen this before, Brazil. I am not a huge Sorkin. I have not seen a lot of Sorkin, so that's probably why, I didn't draw a connotation. But the thing is that I stopped it when the introduction was on. That went on for like 18 or 20 minutes or so. I think if you'd cut that in half the time, because after a while it got tedious. I liked it. These things are a really good way to introduce the world, introduce the characters, get the flow of the film. But that wasn't even representative to the rest of the flow of the film. But I think if you had cut that in half, it would have gone farther, because I was like, oh my God, I can't, I'm like, like a few minutes in, I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. I don't really care. And I'm like, I really hope this film starts gelling soon, because right now I didn't like it. But I think after that, I agree. Ian and I both agree. Yeah, we appreciate this film a lot. I think nowadays to have a less is more film is daring, because quite frankly, I find action films really boring for the most part, unless you've got somebody like George Miller, because I love Fury Road, and that is arguably a 2-hour car chase. But it was exquisitely done. Most people fall into the Michael Bay to Asylum film realm, which are probably closer than people think. So I think it's, Beth and I were talking about this, and what Ian said. I think it's odd that something this thoughtful and after the introduction well paced is an anomaly and is something to be respected. But it is, and I agree with you, Ian. It deserves a 2. Because I agree with you 100% on the intro. So,
yeah, I mean, so 1.75 rounded up to a 2 is pretty much where I stand. And while I see what you guys mean about, like, yeah, the opening like 10, 15, 20 minutes even, like, might be a little too much. Like, it's like throwing too much at you. Like, you're like, Jesus, like, just wind it down a bit, right? But I thought you might say this, Chris, for like before that, the actual framework is, again, a full Twilight Zone thing. Like, imagine if you will. It's like, and I admit my bias for that's something that's going to get me. I'm like, all right, I'm along for the ride. Now, yeah, it had like a little bit of a rockier start, but I think right when they picked up, when the main characters get to their respective radio station and switchboard jobs, that's when it really started to take off. Mm-hmm. So, and then it did a really good job with the narrative throughout, and for various reasons, which we'll get to. So, yeah, I'm sticking with the 2 as well. Maybe just a little bit of a stronger one, but totally see what you guys mean. I get it. So I think we're agreeing anyway. So what do you think, Steve-O?
That's interesting. Everything you guys said. It's interesting that you mentioned the Twilight Zone thing, Scott. Like, I honestly thought of all the conventions that this was trying to like mimic and mess with, that was the most useless, I guess. Like, there's really no point in doing that other than to say, hey, this is something that's kind of like Twilight Zone, Yeah, like, I mean, but as far as like the intro walk and talk, yeah, it's super Sorkin-esque, right? It's very like West Wing-esque. I actually was really impressed with the style of that, but since we're not talking about the style, I guess I'm gonna kind of dial that back a little bit. There wasn't a ton, like, all you got in that, and like when that opening started to get good was when he goes out with when Everett goes out with Faye, go out and start doing the interviews and stuff, and you get their dynamic, because that's the thing that's important. Him talking to all those people on the way through is like, okay, he's like this fast talking DJ. I guess that's what they're trying to introduce, but like, we can figure that out later. And like, he never really goes back to that style of being a human, I guess. But like, I thought that the second half of the introduction was interesting when they're going out getting interview, when she's messing around with her recorder and stuff. But you're right, the plot and like a lot of this is gonna, like, I feel like this is a tale of like 5 different movies in terms of style, but the plot, I think, actually does a pretty good job of sticking together. I'm gonna give it a 2 as well, for like a fairly weak back half, I guess, like in terms of plot. not back half, but like the very tail end of the movie, I was like, okay, I guess it's just gonna end. And I had my own issues with the old lady's story. I don't remember if we got her name. I think we did, but I don't remember what it was.
This is Blanche, if I remember that correctly. I think, Steve.
Mabel Blanche. Yeah.
Mrs.
Mabel
Blanche's
Blanche.
son is missing.
Yeah, this is Blanche's son is abducted by aliens.
I much preferred Billy's story.
Yes.
But it was really interesting to like hear those different like kind of conspiracy tales like told through these people who are seeing it happen again. So I'm gonna give a 2 as well to plot, although I think a little bit stronger than most of you guys in terms of that.
I had 2 quick comments, but I'm going to do my second one. I don't remember if I remember my first one, but it kind of reminded me of doing audio logs in video games where they're telling you the backstory. Oh, we're randomly going to come upon this NPC and they're going to tell us. But it worked for me. Weirdly. Also, I remember my first point. I thought the introduction was actually a clever way of setting up all the players in the film. They introduce a bunch of people who never appear ever again.
Yeah.
And like that subversion is kind of clever, but I don't know if that's the intent. But I thought like, oh, they're setting up all the main players that are being involved in this.
I was actually kind of hoping to hear back from a lot of those people, the townsfolk or whatever.
What happened to the trombone player guy, you know?
We ended up going-
trombone.
Yeah, his trombone.
He's never getting that back. The guy's gone now.
The guy's got. Fucking stole his trombone.
In the locker forever. But anyway.
Yeah. The Twilight Zone framing, I mean, again, Scott and I think we can both agree that's probably one of our top 3
Just a sucker for
favorite
it.
shows. And it also kind of reminded me a lot of Alan Wake, because they had a whole takeoff on that themselves. That is a framing device where you kind of bring it.
But that was actually part of the plot in Alan Wake, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, that kind of filled you into certain things, but with
It was
this
more connected than it was in this, Steve, to answer that, yes.
But to kind of make this kind of an episode of The Outer Limits, was a little weird because it had this meta thing that I don't feel was quite right about it. But the NPC thing, Ian, that's my whole point, is because I think a lot of Alan Wake. I was thinking a lot of Destroy All Humans too, because the 50s were such a white bread time, like literally and figuratively, and it's just so homogenistic, but the aesthetic is always cool. Like that's why Fallout takes it. That's why everybody keeps drawn to this, because that aesthetic is just so great, even if the time period was so stupid.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Sounds like 2.
All right. Let's talk about themes. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, and I stopped there because I'm like, about to go into themes. One of the things I like about this film is it doesn't hang on the Red Scare crap. That is so. I mean, it's brought up.
It's a red herring.
But yeah, communism is a red herring.
Red
That's a good callback.
Communism red herring.
Yeah, I'm glad they didn't go, they didn't embrace that the way they could have embraced it. I really liked the themes as far as being concrete are kind of nebulous in that there's a lot of things drawn into it. There's paranoia. This is literally and figuratively a game of telephone. This is a story. You've got recounts of stories that are years old. You've got, hysterical reactions coming through the phone lines, and you've got so many stories. And right where there's so much concrete evidence, that's when Everett is the one who actually decides, like, kind of walks out, and the old lady's like, fuck this, and they go outside, and they're like, they see the car, and it's like, oh, it's and I like the fact they didn't explain everything. So thematically, I find it kind of nebulous. I kind of find it all over the place, but I think in a microcosm, like if you take any microcosm, it can be its own theme, whether with regard to the nature of stories, the nature of certain amount of information that's unverifiable, that over time or over repetition, what it becomes, how it affects you. To me, that was the most interesting aspect of the story because I was watching this last night. I was a little tired, so some of the lengthier things I was getting lost on, but I liked the rhythm of it. I whether or not like I got every single beat within like a story or something, the overall aesthetic, the overall conveyance of ideas in this and the way they were presented, came through loud and clear. And I found it very fascinating because up until the end, I was kind of like doubting. I'm like, whether or not this was real or not. So I'm going to give it a nebulous 1 because I think thematically there is a bunch of disparate parts that do create a whole, but I don't think there is a distinct thematic push beyond paranoia. But I think overall the themes are about communication and storytelling and things of that nature. So I'm definitely going to give it a 1.
So I want you guys to E and Steve-O to go after me because while I agree with like a large extent of what you just said, Chris, I'm still like in my mind and even on paper like wavering. Like I'm not sure what to score it. It's not like they're devoid of themes, but I'm not sure. I guess, excuse me, because of maybe the nebulous nature of it. It's not like I'm confused about it, but were themes like really the point of this film? And I'm sure you guys can maybe like do your thing and dig out some stuff or like have you considered this. But that's where I lie. So I'm sort of wavering. So that's just my thought. So please, now you guys take it away.
I'm going to build off what Chris said. Okay. Because I think, oddly enough, the atmosphere of this film really drove home. And it's something, and what I really loved about this film, even though I didn't, probably the parts were stronger than the whole here, is that it really returned you to a world pre-internet where your information isn't at hand. And I think that atmosphere they built of desperate for scraps of information and building a narrative. And who knows? Is the old woman telling the truth or not? Is the guy the shady? That's why I brought up Coast to Coast AM. If anyone knows that type of thing, but it's the idea is that not having that kind of access is this great, I think, atmospheric theme they had in here. Then there's so like the couple who I think turned out to be aliens. I'm unsure about that.
No. They were just affected. Like
they responded to the signal.
The sun was affected, right? So they fell asleep when they played the signal.
Sure.
I think that was the point. At least that's what I got out of it.
Clear.
We're on desperate for scraps of information about what this means as well. But that's the thing is like it's all like I enjoyed the paranoia of not having information at your hand, especially as my profession. But that's my thought.
Well, it absolutely was like one of the main themes is the proliferation of ideas and information, right? Like they even say like the aliens don't want a lot of people around, don't want people to know this, and like as it gets easier to tell stories, it kind of chases them away, I think was like kind of what they said in the movie.
Puts them off or something.
Yeah. Well, they don't want a lot of people around. They said once the gym empties out, or I guess it was the old woman was saying like once the gym empties out, they're going to hit the hills. But I do like that idea of like this almost atmospheric thematic element to this movie where like it is this kind of idea of the unknown becoming known, I guess, a little bit more. I honestly, I wish that they hadn't shown the UFO at the end of the movie. Just because it kind of made things a little bit less mysterious and therefore like kind of less
impactful.
Yeah, I guess so. But the fact that they are taken up just like the woman's son, or if not taken up, like I interpreted it as either they were taken up on the ship or they were just burned into a pile of ash. right?
I
Like,
guess that's the open question of the ending. Like, sure, I get you.
and if that was the case, why and what's the deal and all that stuff? Like, of course, this brings up as it's supposed to so many more questions than it actually answers, I would think. But yeah, I mean, I think the theme is strong enough. It's not like a super laser focused idea that this movie wants you to go in on, but it's more about like the mystery and like the. Go ahead.
They bring up her discussing about the future cell phones. He works as the voice of the vox populi, in a sense, of the area, and she is legitimately the connector of conversations.
Yeah.
Like, it is all about communication there. So,
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, that's for sure like the general grand thing. Anyway, Chris, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna say it because Ian, I talked around it, but you brought up a really good point that not only is this the 1950s like a cool aesthetic, even though it was a stupid time, the fact that it was set in the 1950s was a great time to set it because you came out. That's when we moved away from the switchboards. I mean, like the 50s are when they switched over, where you didn't have that kind of, I mean, you had the smaller towns. So this was right in the middle of where technology was. This is like right at the dawn of the atomic age, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, it's now that you brought that up, I'm like, yeah, this is a great time to set it, not just for aesthetics, but with regard to technology, with regard to communication, where it's advanced enough to be speculative, but not advanced enough to have anything actually come into fruition. Or so yeah.
I don't know. So like, I mean, I guess I'm gonna end up giving it a 1, but I do want to like slightly just murmur you guys, if you will. Like you were saying, like aesthetics and atmosphere. Sure, that's all great. That's all style. That isn't thematic, but I think it does sort of flow into it. But I meant to mention, I guess I'll mention it right now. Close Encounters is, I definitely got like tones of that. And so if you had mentioned that before, Chris, if you meant to, like, it's kind of obvious, right? And also, there's nothing to do with themes per se, but it's this movie. Steve will double check me real quick, but the same person. So like, the vision is all there.
You froze for a second. What'd you say?
I believe Vast Night is written and directed by the same person.
Well, Andrew Patterson directed it, and he co-wrote it with Craig Sanger.
I thought, but one of them is a pseudonym. But anyway.
Oh, maybe.
I'm saying the creative input is like there. So like, I'm saying is like, you guys convinced me like more so than I was even like leaning towards, which I still was leaning towards the 1 anyways. But I just wanted to like, jokingly like, half be like, it's actually not, aesthetics are not themes, but it does tie in because you're right, because of the general feeling of that era, which then like has its own, like, you assume the themes of this kind of stuff anyways, especially given a sci-fi tale such as this. So I will give it a 1 at the end of the day.
Yep. All right. Sounds good. I think we're going to give it all 1s for that. And that's going to go on as you, Scott, with Antagonist.
So again, like maybe this even flows in from the previous things, everything we just said. I mean, what are they antagonized by? A mysterious signal ostensibly coming from space, or at least a mysterious signal interrupting the radio station and people's 1957 Arizona or New Mexico. So, and then that, of course, like spurs the mystery, like what's happening? Well, let's figure it out. Like now people are calling, thinking, well, I've heard it. I work for the military/government, and they had us working on some shady shit. They wouldn't tell us, but I heard that noise before, and I think it's this. I think it's alien. Not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens. But I feel like the characters and maybe the script did a good enough job of like selling that. Like, yeah, they wanted to figure it out, and they're tracking down leads, like the lead or two that they have. And then at the end, like essentially they're proven right. Like they literally see an alien ship, whether or not Steve-O, like whether or not they're taken up or whether or not it burns them to a crisp and the recorder is all that's left. It doesn't kind of actually matter in the sense that the characters for like after 20% through the film, they are just trying to figure out what the hell is going on. Hey, call in if you know what's up. And now it's getting increasingly, the tension is ratcheting it up, right? They're trying to figure it out. So I think that's good enough. Like, while there's no like necessarily like, again, like corporeal, like the aliens do not invade, like it's not like fucking Mars attacks or anything like that. But it is in a similar-ish general vein, and they are struggling with trying to work out what's happening and understand it and like, deal with it. Like, okay, if it really is aliens, well, then I guess that's what's up. So I guess I'll give that like an okay-ish one. So
I'm kind of on the other end of that. And there is tension at moments in this, specifically during the call. And then they keep. So, if anything, I think that long distance calling is more in this than the aliens were. But you mentioned earlier, Steve, the reveal at the end. He never revealed the creature. I mean, I guess they had to, but they didn't have to.
He could have done it in a better way, I think.
Yeah. Overall, I might, even though that might be my actual main problem, is that instead of having a good build up to alien invasion or a monster, they stuck us with an old grandma, and I think that might have been my major issue with this. That the pacing fell off there. So yeah, I'm probably gonna give a 0 to antagonist.
I can see it. Like, I'm gonna give it a soft 1, still 1, but I see your soft 0, and I totally get it. So, what do you guys think?
I think I'm gonna agree with
Go on.
Ian on this one. I honestly, if they didn't show that UFO at the end of this movie, I might be saying a different score right now. But honestly, the aliens were never the true antagonists throughout this. They were kind of the mystery, the thing.
MacGuffin.
Like the tension and all that stuff that going through it was like really what was driving it. And once you cut that tension, it was all like, what was this for? Okay, now we don't even know what it was for, because we don't know actually what happened to these two anyway. So I am going to give antagonist a 0 on this one. I liked a lot of points. I like the tension at a lot of points in this movie, and I thought they were doing a really good job with it. But I thought they cut it without a reason to at the end, and I wish they hadn't.
I agree with the two of you. I think you both brought up some good points. And I'm going to say that it's the journey, not the destination with this one, because Ian, you said this movie is about communication, and the fact that they said it when they did before the information age, quote unquote, was a smart way to do it. Because even now you got to research the shit out of everything, because you always got to double check your sources. Steve-O, to your point, I wholeheartedly agree. Don't show the alien, have them looking up, and then at the end, just leave the tape recorder, because the thing is, the only thing that brings back, that takes away from the fact that they might not be vaporized, is wouldn't the tape recorder be melted and it looked like it was intact from what I remember. I think it would have been much more effective if you just had them. And I love that compassion at the end. I love the fact that she's holding her little sister, that he holds them both, that there's not romantic, but there's just a human need to comfort each other. I think it would have been much more effective. We don't show the alien. You show that cut to the gym, everybody filing out, and then cut back to the field where you just see the tape recorder. You don't see any dust, anything. They're just gone. Did they run away? Did they get abducted? Who knows? That would have been, but I think the fact, because that would have then made the themes of communication and miscommunication also the antagonist, and they want to have their cake and eat it too. And I don't, where it succeeded in themes, I agree with you guys wholeheartedly. I don't feel like it succeeded in antagonism. So
you guys convinced me. I'm gonna switch to a 0. Yeah, well done. You're right. I just think not enough. Like, what somebody said, like, you appreciate it, but wish the execution was better. I think that's a good way to apply it to this question. And
yeah, for sure. All right, so let's talk about protagonists with me. I think it's both Everett and Faye in this. I actually enjoyed both of them quite a bit. Faye maybe even quite a bit more than Everett. He kind of had his moment in the sun in that opening part that you guys didn't super love, and I was, I thought it was one of the.
He was Gary Stu. Oh, he knows everything, sells everything. He's the best. Yeah. Like whatever. Yeah,
he's the Uber nerd, I guess, running everything. But I actually really like Faye's character quite a bit throughout this. I loved her moments at the Switchboard.
Yes.
I just thought that was so cool. And like, we're going to get into style with this eventually, but I think everything else in this movie bleeds over a little bit into style. I thought two very good performances between both of them, especially for two people that I don't think I've ever seen or heard of before.
I did not recognize them. Yeah. Either.
And yeah, I don't have much else to say. I like them both, and I think I'm going to give them a pretty strong one.
Yeah, I'll back you up. I think it's obvious they're dual protagonists. And yeah, while Everett was set up like, oh, he's like super competent, he knows everything, this and that. Like, obviously, he's the radio guy, so he's going to know what's up. But I think there's a good moment, and like you mentioned, Steve, one of the things when Faye's at the switchboard, like she's just on her game, like she knows what's up. She's not freaking out or anything, or at least she's past that, and she just takes control. She takes agency, and I think that was really well done. So in that respect, I agree. I'm going to give them both a strong one.
And really quickly, before any of you guys go, a way to, like, he was kind of a Gary Stu character in this, right? But like a way to take character that might be perceived as that and make them seem a lot better in my eyes, which is something they did in this, is to have a bunch of situations where he clearly doesn't know what's going on.
He's out of his depth.
And is willing to admit it. And like, that's one of my favorite things about a character and just a person in real life, is when they're just so clearly out of their depth and they're willing to admit it and be like, okay, let's figure this out, instead of like, oh, I know everything and you have to listen to me. So I was glad that this character did that kind of in this situation.
Yep. Right on.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say I'm quite fond of these characters. I like the fact that it started off where she's basically looking up to Everett like he is a mentor of sorts. But when it comes down to brass tacks, she's quick acting. She knows where everything is. You see her at the switchboard. She's completely competent. And that's why I feel the ending resonated so much. And I wish they didn't show the aliens, because all of a sudden you do have that human connection. You do have that where, you have Everett who's kind of like isolationist, kind of cold, not in a negative connotation, but that's just his character. He's more of
Luffy's better than everybody. He knows everything.
Yeah, but I really liked the human connection that they formed at the end. I really just enjoyed thoroughly the journey of these two characters. So I'm giving it a very strong one.
Yep.
Ian's on board. All right, Ian. Continue ranting at us with supporting characters, please.
Sure. So, overall, the supporting characters, I would say they're the two major ones. You have the old lady and you have Billy. Old lady was a fine actress, but I made my complaints already about everything. However, Bruce Davis as Billy, as the voice over the radio, was fantastically acted. And that is also going to style. They cut to black while he's talking so that you have to pay attention to what he's saying. And that's a very, I think, daring move on a film to legitimately, for minutes at a time, have a blank screen with just someone talking. And
like radio.
Yes. Oh, but I might give a 1 for the performance, Bruce Davis's performance on that.
I am 100% backing it up. Like, I was somewhat wavering, but that is the absolute reason. If you're going to give it a 1, you have to give it a 1 for that specific thing. And you're right. Old lady, like Mrs. Blanche or whatever, like, she's fine. She does her thing, but the way that Billy, sorry, what was the actor's name?
Bruce Davis.
Bruce Davis. Yeah. The way he read it out, like, was saying his lines, and the way that the film just was like, fuck you, cut in the black, that made it so much more effective, and that is why I'm giving secondary a 1 for by and large.
Yeah, I completely agree with you guys. I would give this a 0 if that character didn't exist in the movie, and I'm going to give it a 1 because he did exist. That's pretty much all I have to. That's what I came to say.
I agree.
All right. Chris is also on a 1. Chris is also on that Billy train.
He's on the Billy wavelength.
All right. So that's going to be 1s all around for supporting. And Chris, let's talk about dialogue.
This film is 90, I was going to say 90, but it's about 80% dialogue. That's what it is. And I don't think, this is one of those, when you have something like Billy, we're definitely going to go to Billy as opposed to the old lady. His story was very compelling. And again, like I said, the synapses were not firing after a miserable day at work, but even if I'm working from home, it's still mind numbing. Yeah, go ahead, fire me.
You're fired.
No one from work is listening to this.
Not you guys. I'm 1/4 of this business, but no, but the thing is, for a lot of Billy's story is important and the old lady's story is important. But the fact of the matter is, you may not have caught a lot of the dialogue, but the dialogue was important as an affect or as an effect.
It's affect.
Affect. I think it's important because you got a lot of information from the way the dialogue was presented to you. I thought that was a very interesting aspect of this because you had a disembodied voice in Billy, and as you said, they made the scream go to black, so you had to listen to him. And you had the old lady story, but then you had all these voices, disembodied voices that you heard of, the people that were mentioned in passing, whether or not they showed them at all or not, but you got the reactions. Doing the switchboard thing was such a smart idea for this because, again, when you're in a pre-information age where you don't have that kind of feedback, becomes very, very important. So this is one of those cases where I'm going to give a 1 to dialogue, even though it's not like, hey, I guess it was naturalistic for, what the settings were. I mean, if we went by the first 18 minutes of the film, I would have said, no, my God, it's like contrived. It's contrived. I guess Sorka, I've like literally not even seen an entire episode
all right. You're very hipster. You've never seen it.
But the thing is, but the information from then on out, the dialogue, the rhythm of the dialogue for most of the parts was great. I think that communicated more than a lot of lines may have. So I'm going to give it a 1.
I mean, I'll largely back it up, of course. All right. And you're right. Like, as we discussed, and I'll just briefly recap here, like, yeah, maybe the opening intro with Everett just being like, I'm the best ever, and hey, oh, bada, bada, boo, right? All this kind of shit, right? Your mileage may vary. I liked it. Like, I sympathize with the character, kind of. Like, I'm like, but then it sort of like calmed down. It opened itself up, and yeah, Billy's monologue, like his dial into the registration, is a highlight of it. And I felt like I guess I want to add this, like, even within like the opening 20 minutes, like the small time interactions, like, and like he goes to see some guy, and like, I didn't say Everett, I wanted Emmert, and like they start arguing with each other or whatever, and like he just fucking leaves. Like, I feel like that added to the world building, and then the actual dialogue, especially of course when it's just Everett and Faye, trying to figure out, talking to each other, and they go interview people, and like they're trying to get Billy back on the for this and that. All that, I'm saying, like, it all adds up. Maybe the sum or the parts are greater than the sum, etc., whatever. But I'm still giving dialogue a 1 at the end of the day for all of that. So.
Yeah.
Aside from the opening dialogue, I feel like whoever wrote that was different than the person who read the rest of the dialogue. Or they're showing off like how quick they can write, but it was too fast for me. When it's slowed down, when it started, I actually feel like they really, as you're saying, really captured the small town vibe of this. So yeah, I give it a strong 1.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a really strong 1. This movie, as we mentioned earlier in themes, is all about communication. Or a lot about communication, and it doesn't work without good dialogue, and it has it. So I'm going to give it a 1.
Yeah.
And I think that's a 1 for everybody on this category. And Scott, why don't you talk about style?
Certainly. So like I said, like, I mean, the opening framework, when it goes to like an old 50s TV, and it's like, and like a Rod Serling-esque voice comes to like, imagine a world in which this and that is happening, and like, welcome to I think it was Paradox Theater, or it's like their XP. I always like to see like what fucking like faux title they're gonna use to, like, this is totally not Twilight Zone or whatever, right? But even on top of all of that, the framework is fine, but some of the shots are just fucking amazing, especially like when like sort of like the tracking shots, and I took it to be like the signals through the air or something like that. Like, I think Ian asked me, he's like, what POV is this? I'm like, so there's a moment where when Everett is walking Faye from the gym to their jobs, and there's a dog starts following them. I was like, it's almost like from the dog's POV. Like it's like, you're following them on the street or whatever. But I'm just saying all that to say, and I'll leave something else for you, Chris, maybe you, Steve-O, but the shots themselves, cinematography, framework, blocking, all of that stuff fit so well to the story they were telling that on the strength of that alone, I'm giving it a 1.
So I liked it. Some of it felt kind of first-time filmmaker style.
It was.
I felt it, yeah. But there's one scene in particular when half of it they're cutting to black for the conversation. The other half they're doing long shots on Everett's face as he's listening to it. Long takes of him processing this information. And I actually thought that was some of the best. It was very intimate. But it was intimacy on one side, because the other side, it's such like a unique take on the shot reversal thing of shot and then nothing. And it's so like that. Like that was the part I was most enraptured with in this entire film. But so yeah, also music was pretty good, except one song felt slightly asynchronous or anachronistic. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. Anyway, so yeah, 1.
I agree with Ian in that as much as I love the aesthetic and as much as I love the feel of this film and love that kind of summer night you can just feel in it, that is kind of by the book. But Scott, that tracking shot where we go from the switchboard to the radio station was wonderful. And Ian, you're absolutely right. Again, wow, it's so courageous to actually have the focus on 1 or 2 characters and get their reactions while they're listening to a story or figuring things out amongst themselves, trying to keep, the devil is in the details in this movie, because this movie could have been as bland as anything. And the fact that we're talking about a movie that maybe a couple of us aren't really 100% sure how much we liked or if we liked, the fact that we are talking about this to the degree that we are, that this film is very nuanced in a lot of ways, I think would fly by a lot of people. So I have to give this a 1.
It's actually, I view this movie as like really fascinating thing, because I think I mentioned earlier in the podcast, it's like almost multiple different movies, especially style wise. And I've been waiting to get to style because I have kind of a good amount to say on it. This is, part 1 is the walk and talk, like Aaron Sorkin. Part 2 is all close up on Faye's face at the switchboard, which is like just this really fascinating scene where you don't move the camera. Like the first part is all camera movement, and it's all like about how the camera moves around him as he's walking through the school and all this stuff. And then you cut out to like the faux Twilight Zone thing, and you cut back in, and it's like boom, 1 shot on her face, and that's it for 20 minutes. And then it goes back out, and in between that and Billy's story, you have the shot that you guys are talking about, where it's this long tracking shot through the entire town. It goes into the basketball game, like sees everybody there that we introduced earlier, and then just like is like, fuck these guys again, and goes back out to the radio station. And then we get kind of these cuts onto Everett and off of him, when like it's mostly, I think, when Billy's talking, the screen is black, and when Everett's talking, it'll cut back onto him, and sometimes it'll be like the staticky screen, so like blue saturated staticky screen. Sometimes it'll be like the straight up, like, I think most of this movie is like kind of sepia toned or something. So like we get that, and then once that's done, then it kind of turns into the Alien movie after that, and it's more sticks together overall. Like, I love all of these styles on their own separately for what they do for the movie, but like they don't really, it's not one like specific thing. And I don't know whether to be like glad and like congratulate the movie for that or to be like, oh, this doesn't really hold together. But like in my mind, so like I'm just gonna go with how I felt about it, I guess, in terms of like I don't know how to do that. And then like in my mind, it held together pretty well, like throughout these scenes, even though they were like were really really different styles, and even though like I think the colors changed quite a bit. I think the thing that was the most it's like standardized stylistically was the music was except for the one I don't know which song you were talking about, Ian, but you said
One with the sitar.
It was more like a psychedelic, like 60s track versus like late 50s style. We definitely noticed it, but that's all.
I think these were done by like a band from the 50s or something, like most of the songs from this. But anyway, I really enjoyed the music for most of it, and there's like this really tight stylistic control, which I wouldn't expect from. I don't think that this director has done anything else. Any other?
It was his debut film for sure.
Yeah, I don't think he's done any other feature films. So I'm really impressed with the control on each scene of this, and it's so weird to see like all these different styles merged together. But that said, I was really impressed with the style for the most part. I gave my couple of qualms in this, but I didn't have much to complain about in terms of style. I think that's what made this movie good as opposed to a boring movie, and I'm going to give it a 1.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just cap off and sort of just like somewhat like rejoined you in a sense. Like, yeah, it seems as if those three styles, like in theory, taken separately, like may not necessarily fit together, but I think it was done in such a way like it was intentional. Like, okay, now we're going to use this style, and then it flows somewhat into the next one, and then the third part, right? And it all works together. So,
yeah, I mean, it was definitely intentional, but like it was like almost 3 different episodes of Twilight Zone or something, you know? Like,
sure, I mean,
which I didn't mind. Like at the end of the day, I didn't mind it, so it's fine with me. I'll give it a 1, and I think each of the 3 or 4 styles that throughout this are done pretty well.
So you're right. It's his first work, but he also has made an as yet untitled film, a revenge thriller set in the honeybee industry.
All about this.
I'm down.
Revenge.
Awesome.
Sign me up.
Yeah, sign me up.
They
for that
deserve
one,
it.
too.
All right. So, anybody else have anything else for style? All right, let's move on to recommend, and that's me. I'm gonna definitely recommend this movie. I think that we had it recommended to us by some people that
a couple friends of ours
didn't know if they would love a movie like this, and they said they liked it quite a bit. So, I am going to recommend it, and I'm going to recommend it maybe to a wider swath of people than I would have earlier, just based on that. So, that's me.
Yeah, I mean, put me down for a 1. I would recommend it because, again, as I admit it just touches a lot of things that I personally am into, nostalgia or otherwise, just genre-wise as well. And yeah, Sam and Lauren, what's 2 of our good friends, recommend, and Joe Soria also said he had seen it a couple of times and really liked it, and was going to, in a different reality, be on this episode. But either way, strong 1 for me. I definitely like Vast of Night, and I definitely say check it out.
I'm also going to give it a 1 because I want to see it again, because I've been having a very hard time letting this film go. I saw 2 films this week, this and Bliss, and I have not been able to let either of them go.
And Snow White.
What?
Nothing.
All right. No, but the thing is, I found this to be a fascinating film. Again, I am not 100% sure where I fall in the like spectrum. I really want to love this film. I don't know if I do, and I don't even think a rewatch will. But the fact that I rewatch it, and the fact that I find it interesting, and the fact that there are people that I'm thinking like, just watch this film. Check it out. It might be something you're interested in. Just get past the first 15 minutes or whatever. It's a very it's interesting. And by the way, and not for nothing, the way I feel about Edgar's, and this guy is definitely not Robert Edgers or Ari Aster. God, I'm fucking
Ari Aster.
Ari Aster. But it is such nowadays, and Beth and I, this is something we've talked about the last week because this keeps coming up. It is such a treat to have a film this small that is interesting, even though if you're not sure you liked it. I want to support these kind of things because this was a worthy effort. It's a short film. It's like an hour and a half. And like I said, I really like to encourage these kind of films because I'm really sick of the blockbuster and I like the way we're moving away from that. So I'm going to give it a recommend.
No. And I don't have a really good reason for it. But gut instinct is it's already starting to fade. And I just watched it today. And I've often said that when challenge you guys when you're like, I'm going to remember this movie forever. And I'm like, no, you're not. And then you don't. But then some movies stick around. I just don't see this one sticking around. Because I had to read up about it before we did this podcast to remind myself about the details I wanted to say. Perhaps that's just my state of mind, as Chris would say. But I'm just my gut instinct says no.
That's fair. And it might temper the average score, and that's perfectly fine.
I could see that for sure.
Listen, I was debating. Oh, sorry, go on.
I was gonna say this movie definitely has parts of other movies that are more memorable, right? Like this movie is like farms a bunch of memorable movies for the memorable parts.
Yeah.
And maybe that'll stick and maybe it won't, but for sure, like you guys have 2001 up in the background, like Close Encounters more so, but like even this has like a Back to the Future aesthetic too, that type of thing, like when they're in the 50s and Back to the Future and stuff like that. So like it's kind of got a lot of that stuff. Anyway, Chris, what were you gonna say?
No, I was gonna say it was Ian. Last night I was probably coming down on your side of things, but Beth and I were talking about this all day, and I just want to let you know that I was coming down on your side to a certain point, and then I was, it was just like I said, probably more appreciation and more of the I'm so glad we're getting away from blockbusters, especially this year. Look at the films we've seen. Look at the films that are actually being nominated for stupid award shows. I mean, you've got like Nomadland. Oh my God, what's that one? Minari.
Hey, I knew. I guessed it. It was one of.
Yeah, I can never remember the name of the film. But you've got these wonderful little films, and I know I'm probably the only one Beth and I are probably the only ones who still give a lot of credit to Gretel and Hansel, which stuck with me.
Correct.
But my whole point is this year has been very few blockbusters. One of the good things about COVID is it kept a lot of that. I didn't have to go to the theater to be annoyed by Wonder Woman 1984, but by the same token, it's been a year of these small films, these like treats. I didn't even bother with Tenet at this point.
Snyder, that's great.
Huh? Are you fucking kidding me? You didn't bother. Listen, Chris, I get it, but you're like gung ho about watching 4 hours of Batman and Superman and fucking Wonder Woman. I get
not even IMAX.
You guys are going nuts in the Snyder Cut next week, which I'm looking forward to hearing what you say.
No, let's put it that way. Let's be clear about one thing. This is an obligation. Rich Louie and I, for better or worse, started on this DC bullshit. We've got to follow through. Ian, bless his heart, is just like, I'm an outsider to all this. Let me go inside the scene.
I have not seen a DC movie since Man of Steel.
Yeah, so you're the perfect man for the job.
Yeah, actually, so that was more of an obligation
for our next week's episodes.
No, and I'm not sure on Tenet. I am going to see Tenet, but there's been all these smaller films that have been so good and so interesting, and this is the direction I like that we're seeing a lot more of this. And like I said, Edgar as an Astor, really did bring a lot of gravitas to that, and to a certain degree, Oz Perkins. I just appreciate these small efforts, and I do want to continue to support them, unless they're shit, in which case I will be absolutely upfront and honest and be like, this is pretentious bullshit. So,
all right. Fair enough. So 1.
Yes.
All right. That's going to be 3 1s and a 0 for recommend. And that's going to bring us to the end here. We've got
the score
3 8s for myself, Scott, and Chris. And Ian returning once again to the role of going back. You've been pretty optimistic lately, I feel like. So you have to go back to be a curmudgeon once in a while.
Bounce it out.
Gave the film a 7. So we all agreed on Plot got 2s all around, pretty good, but not a perfect plot. Antagonist got a 0, not much of an antagonist in this one, and not strong enough for 1. And then Ian also doesn't know if it's going to stick around. Doesn't think it's going to hold up.
Just like the aliens.
Instinct.
They were here,
Yeah.
they were gone.
Fair enough. So that's a 7.75 aggregate score.
It'll be fun.
Which I think is pretty good, you know?
I think it's right on the money, actually.
Yeah. And so that's going to do it for us. I have been your host, Steve Ramosi, joined today by Christopher Morgan.
Speaking of Alien, rest in peace, Yaphet Kotto. He died this week.
Yeah. R.I.P. Jonathan E. Manzer
Have a good night.
and Scott Thurlow.
ST phone home. Thanks for joining us. See you next time. Cheers.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Ramosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?